Hi all. This is the last newsletter of the year entitled A Seer's Insights into 2023 and Beyond. As the world appears to be growing darker, it accelerates our awakening to illuminate all that is. And the quote to start us off is from the Unknown Teachings of Lao Tzu. If you want to awaken all of humanity, then awaken all of yourself. If you want to eliminate suffering in the world, then eliminate all that is dark and negative in yourself. Truly, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self-transformation. Here we go. Dear one, please give yourself the gift of a wholehearted welcome to living in the midst of the Kali Yuga, a term used in ancient Vedic texts to describe an incredibly long cycle of time considered the Dark Ages in terms of materialism and greed trumping spiritual growth. The Kali Yuga lasts for 864,000 years. A little more than 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga has passed at present. That being said, it obviously helps to maintain an extremely long-range Taoist perspective of everything evolving perfectly in the flow, called Wu Wei, also known as effortless action in the Taoist tradition. Or conversely, we could just continuously sigh oy vey every time we choose to watch the fear-baiting delivery system of the 24/7 news cycle without adjusting our attitude first. Then a quote by Chogyam Trungpa: "Don't fight with reality, don't defend against it, rather read it like you would a newspaper. Read everything that happens to you and to others as pertinent news about the reality of being human, of being you." Unquote. Since we all chose to be born in a precious human incarnation at this exact moment in history, we might as well get with the program we signed up for, which is utilizing all the chaos in the world, including all the seeming darkness of ignorance, aka absence of light, climate change and global warming, and what is to come from that, as perfect vehicles to help burn our karma and speed our soul growth. For more on this philosophy, there's a link to Leela on my website. In a classic ancient Taoist tale, events transpire which appear to be very bad news, excuse me, alternating with events which appear to be very good news. At each twist and turn of fate, the Taoist sage, in the guise of a simple farmer, when asked whether this is a good fortune or ill, responds, quote, "Maybe yes, maybe no," unquote. There's a link to the story. My favorite real-life version of this Taoist wisdom story began in 1949 when the peaceful Buddhist country of Tibet was invaded by 35,000 Chinese troops who systematically raped, tortured, and murdered an estimated 1.2 million Tibetans, 1/5 of the country's population. In addition, over 6,000 monasteries were destroyed and thousands of Tibetans imprisoned. Very bad news, right? Couldn't get much worse. Okay, we won't go into the Holocaust. But then, over time, with so many Tibetans being driven into exile because of this horrible ongoing event, Tibetan Buddhism has spread all over the globe, affecting the mass consciousness via the ripple effect and raising the vibration of the planet in innumerable ways. Very good news indeed. And here's a quote with the perspective of the Dalai Lama on all this. Quote, "From the Buddhist point of view, the Chinese officer who is committing the cruel act against the young boy is initiating a new cycle of negative karma. In the case of the child, there is a closure of a particular karma that the child is experiencing. The perpetrator of the crime is in fact an object of more compassion and mercy than the child," unquote. I wrote about a more recent version of the good news, bad news, this good news, bad news way of working with reality in my July 26 newsletter. Quote, "And now most of us are still reverberating from the shock of the reversal of Roe versus Wade and girding ourselves for action by being sure to exercise our voting rights, as well as supporting organizations like Planned Parenthood. This reversal is what I call a spiritual cha-cha, 2 steps forward with the defeat of Trump and now 1 giant leap backwards. But I trust that with 2020 hindsight, we'll see how this temporary setback lit a fire under more than enough voters to flip the switch towards the light in the elections to come. And that what might appear as bad news in the short term will be good news in many more ways long term than we can yet imagine right now," unquote. For an update on this story, there's a link to how Democrats use the abortion debate to hold off a red wave. Here's one of my perennial favorite quotes on Wu Wei, effortless action, from Alan Watts. Quote, "When a cat falls out of a tree, it lets go of itself, becomes completely relaxed, and lands lightly on the ground. If the cat made up its mind that it didn't want to fall, it would become tense and rigid and would just be a bag of broken bones upon landing. In the same way, it is the philosophy of the Tao that we are all falling out of a tree at every moment of our lives. As a matter of fact, the moment we were born, we were kicked off a precipice, and we are falling. And there's nothing we can do to stop it. So instead of living in a state of constant tension and clinging to all sorts of things that are actually falling with us, because the whole world is impermanent, be like a cat. Don't resist it. Unquote. I've been writing about the quickening since the 1990s. I describe it as a continuous, unrelenting acceleration of planetary, galactic, and cosmic energies heralding in the next great age and the evolution of consciousness. The good news, quote unquote, is that we've been experiencing an unprecedented surge of these higher frequency waves bombarding the Earth plane, especially in the last 6 years or so. At this point, it's helpful to keep in mind that we're only on the threshold of the next great age in the sign of Aquarius, which will last for over 2,000 years. At least in Western belief structures, the great ages only last 2 millennium to go along with a more impatient mindset, whereas the Vedic yugas emanate from a much more relaxed and expansive view of time. Two of the most important, deepest, and profound changes that the quickening has produced so far for many of us are that 1. Linear time is no longer the main way we can choose to measure our progress. 2. The Earth plane is no longer the only dimension we can choose to experience being in, while simultaneously fully embodied in 3D. This is epic, as it means that each and every moment in the eternal spacious present, combined with our level of consciousness, of course, determines our whole future karmic enchilada, with the point of power always being right here and right now. It means that we can now choose to live mindfully from the greater reality that each and every moment could be our last, and to act accordingly with full presence. Up until now, it was primarily the last few moments of life of any given incarnation that determined our future karma, as has been taught as a tenet in Tibetan Buddhism and used by me as a teaching tool when doing past life regression therapy. But now, while the last few breaths in the body are still our last best chance to ameliorate any karma with sincere regret for harms done self or others, and thus not carried into future incarnations, the Earth game has become much more expansive as it transcends the training wheels of linear space and time. That's a good quote. The Earth game has become much more expansive as it transcends the training wheels of linear space and time. I like that. So with the gift of the quickening, Tibetan Buddhism's bardo of now, the bardo of the now, and the bardo after we drop our bodies are becoming one. This means we get to more consciously choose to reside in a heaven or hell realm while here and elsewhere. As a bonus, many of us these days are being given the experience of relaxing into the inner void of formlessness out of which all forms spontaneously arise in an infinite loop. And part of the good news, bad news scenario of the quickening is that we are experiencing this dissolution of identity whether we consciously choose to or not, on the little self, ego, personality levels. Oops. Based on my overall read of the force of the current energies affecting us, I've concluded that we've entered the next phase of this ongoing bombardment, with perhaps the maximum speed of vibrational power that human beings have ever had to contend with to date. And the hits just keep coming. The other news is that while the quickening is affecting everyone, for those of us who are psychically sensitive, it can be especially uncomfortable, even though the ultimate outcome is positive. The ability to handle more juice with an expanded consciousness of being. In the meantime, we may feel as if we have what I call the cosmic flu, aka the psychic flu. This is a confluence of symptoms that many finely tuned souls have been experiencing cyclically for decades, me included. The main symptoms can be combinations of fatigue, body aches, joint pain, structural instability, nervousness, free-floating anxiety, aka metaphysical angst, restless sleep, overactive dream states, brain fog, and feelings that the ego identity is disintegrating. And now, in this new phase, the energies flooding us are not just vertical anymore, but horizontal as well. This means that we're being hit simultaneously by the denser cumulative energies of the mass consciousness and the karma of the world. The 1-2 punch of this onslaught can leave us feeling even more unsteady, with episodes of vertigo and short-term memory loss, as we're getting knocked out of linear space and time more and more. My perspective on the exponential increases of ASD, I think that's Asperger's syndrome disorder, CFS, which is chronic fatigue syndrome, and now added on long-haul COVID, includes a multitude of causes, with the quickening being one of the main factors which are exacerbated, all the rest certainly. All with no Western medical cure, of course. And while genetic predispositions and exposure to new mutations of viruses, bacteria, and toxins are also contributing influences, we need to focus more on what we do have power over in terms of what we allow into our beings via harmful substances and energies. This also means focusing on improving our diet and sleep, and cultivating a daily maintenance of our spiritual condition through communing with the Tao, Source, or the Divine. In other words, chilling out and taking care of ourselves as a priority much more than ever before we're forced to. Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun who was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome in 1994, found a way to make accepting what is work through living her teachings as expressed in her many wonderfully nourishing books, which have become spiritual classics. In her words, quote, "The key to working with what is so deeply unwanted is to let go of the ideas and the thoughts about how we shouldn't be sick and what will happen to us if we remain sick. Somehow we have to respect the illness, welcome it, enter into it. We surrender and say, okay, what have you to teach me? About letting go of control, about slowing down, about tasting the full experience of a moment, the light, the sound, the quality of our mood, our pain, the sight of dust or birds, or nothing special. Respecting all that. It's a kind of death, this illness, the best kind of death if we'll let it be. It's the death of old stuck patterns and opinions and habits, and it makes for something new to be born in us. Really, you can trust that. Something new will be born if you'll let the illness show you where to let go of your grip. Let go your grip. And please don't scold yourself for failing ever," unquote. And so, the good news, bad news, of the quickening's higher frequency galactic energies bombarding us, while necessary to kickstart this next stage in the evolution of human consciousness, are also playing havoc with all levels of our bodies, from the psychic to the physical. We are all evolutionary guinea pigs in the vanguard of this new age. Again, some of the side effects of this intense download of energies include overtaxed nervous systems, strained psychic circuitry, disturbed sleep, overactive dream states, unexplainable fatigue and exhaustion, feelings of structural instability and joint pain, irrational anxiety, and brain fog. So if you've been feeling overloaded by higher frequency downloads and or drained or assaulted by lower vibrational energies, then you're exactly on schedule. You're exactly on schedule. But please consider that implementing daily mind, body, spirit practices will radically improve your ability to function on planet Earth in the years to come, especially standing Qigong for grounding and rooting. There's a link to those practices on my website. I've also found, for me personally now, a greater need to take daily adaptogen herbal tinctures such as eleuthero and rhodiola, among others, as well as upping my natural thyroid dose several times over the last few years for my decades-long hypothyroidism, to deal with all the vertical and horizontal bombardment we're on the receiving end of on a daily basis, creating new levels of ongoing stress to all levels of our body systems. For a customized health reading of your physical, energetic, mind, heart, and psychic bodies, there's a link to my psychic counseling. Also considering gifting yourself with a psychic empowerment session, as that seems to be what helps most of my sensitive clients the most. I'll have to change that. In handling the energies of the quickening. There's a scroll down for details on that and a link to my website. I'm sure everyone reading this has been feeling the quickening's energies enough to have been wondering, what the F is going on and when is it going to let up? Well, like the Eagles song Hotel California says, we can check out, but we can never leave. I.e., try to distract ourselves or ignore the quickening, as there truly is no escape and nowhere else to go. In fact, these energies show no sign of ever slowing down again. I will cover more of the astrology of 2023 in future newsletters, but just a mention that transformational Pluto is moving into Aquarius briefly for 3 months starting in March to give us a foreshadowing of what is to come in 2024 and running until 2043. That's almost 20 years. And beyond, as we enter a little more fully into the Aquarian age. For more, there's a link to owning our inner Pluto before it eats us for lunch. In addition, karmic teacher Saturn, whose energies usually make it harder to let go of the illusion of control, is also changing sign in March. So March is a big shift month. The good news is that his sojourn in watery Pisces for the next few years may actually help us relax and go with the flow more, instead of spinning our wheels trying to control the uncontrollable. Also known as any people, place, thing, or circumstance outside of ourselves. For those of us dealing with major acute or chronic health challenges during these best of times and worst of times, may this teaching be of some solace and benefit. And this is a teaching from a Tibetan spiritual teacher from the 18th century. There's a link, Apparitions of the Self, the Secret Autobiographies of a Tibetan Visionary. And here is the quote on sickness, the teaching. Seeing the sicknesses as the teachers, pray to them. Sicknesses are coming to you by the kindness of the masters and the three jewels. Sicknesses are your accomplishments, so worship them as the deities. Sicknesses are the signs that your bad karmas are being exhausted. Do not look at the face of your sickness, but at the one, the mind, who is sick. Do not place the sicknesses on your mind, but place your naked intrinsic awareness upon your sickness. This is the instruction on sickness arising as the Dharmakaya. The body is inanimate and mind is emptiness. What can cause pain to an inanimate thing or harm to the emptiness? Search for where the sicknesses are coming from, where they go, and where they dwell. Sicknesses are mere sudden projections of your thoughts. When those thoughts disappear, the sicknesses dissolve too. There is no better fuel than sicknesses to burn off the bad karmas. Don't get into entertaining a sad mind or negative views over the sicknesses, but see them as signs of the waning of your bad karmas and rejoice over them." Unquote. In summation, it's helpful to keep reminding yourself, if you're feeling increasingly more easily exhausted, destabilized, ungrounded, and downright dizzy, that you are experiencing some of the brand new special effects of the cosmic flu, all brought on by the quickening, which is in a continuous and unrelenting acceleration mode for the foreseeable future to help balance out any encroaching external darkness with more and more internal light. In 2023 and beyond, as we witness more divine orderly chaos on the mass playing field, we're being given the opportunity to step up the level of our game with these never-ending downloads. Here are my personal reminders to support this upgrade in consciousness. 1. Always maintain the witnessing perspective, which allows me to never take anything personally, no matter what is going on. 2. Keep in mind the deepest secret of Tantra. Accept everything just as it is in the moment. Resistance creates suffering. Here's a practice. A. Lean into the pain, desire, sadness, or whatever is arising. B. Become one with it until it consumes and dissolves you. C. Experience being reborn from the ashes and smile. And 3. The flow of life is not under my control. My true power lies in how I choose to respond and move with it. And lastly, 4. If I go for healing and growth in any situation and simultaneously enjoy the ride, I'll have no regrets later. These are truly and always the best of times and the worst of times, and only time will tell what ultimately turns out to be good news. In the meantime, if we maintain the longest range perspective with equanimity and faith in the flow, we can experience viscerally being in a heaven realm while fully ensconced in our physical bodies and enjoy the earth game, especially these days. For in the midst of so many challenges, how better to expand the range of our humanness. This is what I call, quote-unquote, spiritual resistance training. As life pushes at us to make us stronger, we become more filled with overflowing light internally than ever before, and the more we open our vertical channels, the more this infinite supply floods in. A quote by Rumi, quote, "Welcome and attend them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight." Unquote. How many of us can honestly admit that on our that our most traumatic experiences, when we look back at them with 20/20 hindsight, reap the deepest soul growth and karmic healing over time. And if you haven't raised your hand yet, it's a-coming. That's for my young readers. The definition of the word guru means dispeller of darkness. So if we all start owning our inner guru and shining our light brightly outward, affecting all those in our lives and the earth plane itself, we will have no regrets down this long road of unwinding karma we're all on. And the last link for more, becoming one with the inner guru, how to make Saturn your BFF. In closing, I'm holding the vision of all souls as infinite wheels of light spinning round and round, all in the process of being transformed into lighthouses at the perfect time for each in the flow, illuminating in an ever-expanding ripple effect. As signing off, Joan. And one last quote, one of my favorites. We are in the perfect circumstances for our souls to learn whatever they designed this whole game to learn. As the process of karmic fruition speeds up, our lives get freer and freer from attachment, and we create less and less karma. And that's by one of my favorite teachers, Ram Dass. Love to all of you. And since it's the last newsletter of this year, and Happy New Year.